What's up, guys? George Balekji here with Boston has entered the chat. But hey, check out the latest episode of Foxborough Rush wherever you get your podcast. Travis Thomas and myself break down what seemed like a power struggle for the Patriots really is just Mike Vrabel having the power, and find out how we know as well. Then Keegan Stiefel joins the show from NESN.com, and we keep an eye on the top wide receivers, offensive linemen, linebackers, cornerbacks, tight ends, running backs. Yes, basically every position, the guys you should watch for, and the Patriots should have their eye on the combine as workouts roll out from Friday through Sunday out in Indy. That's Foxborough Rush, wherever you get your podcast. New episodes dropping every Monday through Friday. Now, let's get to the chat. All right. The weekend is here. It's Friday on the chat. George Balekji here with Kasey Hudson. Case, what's up?
Very much looking to Friday. Very much looking towards the weekend. My vocabulary is already screaming for the weekend. But no,
brain's running on empty at that
exactly. Point. Last time we chatted, no pun intended, we were just talking about, how great sports have been and how things have been picking up so nicely. Spring training's got a lot going on. And, a lot going on in the hockey world, all the things.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll get to that. New Big Three in Boston, how the Red Sox prospects hope to make that a thing with Tim Crowley stopping by the show. Also, Travis Kelce, don't call it a comeback, but it is that he's hoping. We'll break that down. And the Patriots on the hunt for the top prospect at number 4, Travis Hunter, could make sense there. And while the Bruins go down, it hurts their trade deadline approach. We break down how Bruins getting injured could affect what the team does, but how they still should have the same goal in mind. But let's bring him right off the bat. It's Tim Crowley of NESN.com. He's putting out an awesome series. It's going to debut on Monday, and it'll be a rollout from that point on. Basically, with a spotlight on the top prospects in the Red Sox organization, and not just profiling them, but Tim reaching out to coaches from the high school level, to hitting coaches, guys that helped them come up, and also talking to some of the top developers in the Red Sox system. So he's Tim Crowley right here. Tim, what's up, man? Happy you taking the time to join the chat.
What's going on, guys? We're starting to get, what feels like a little warmer weather. It's not Fort Myers weather up in Boston, but it felt a little better this week. So we're moving in a baseball direction, which is good.
It's the weather where you could walk outside with a T-shirt and not feel like you made an awful mistake. There's some tolerance there.
I was going to say, not a full
crazy.
T-shirt, a long sleeve T-shirt.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
A shirt of some sort. So, Tim, you're going to highlight 8 different prospects in this series. First one rolls out on Monday, but let's focus in on the big 3. It's Kristian Campbell, it's Roman Anthony, and it's Marcelo Mayer. I want to start with you also talking to one of the directors of development for prospects in the Red Sox system, Brian Abraham. What did you pick up from him when talking about any of those top 3 prospects that stood out to you?
Yeah, the confidence is as high as ever, right? And it's fun looking ahead to the spring training because we spent the better part of a year talking about the big 3, and maybe it's a little different now. You sub in Kristian Campbell for Kyle Teal, but the confidence is still there. And you talk about some of the stuff that's come out the last few days. That long column from Jeff Passan at ESPN. The national audience is really starting to pay attention to this. And that was all echoed when I talked to Brian Abraham this week. There's a lot of confidence in knowing that these guys are going to impact the big league club in 2025. How long it's taken to really rebuild this farm system, because this is a group that before Craig Breslow, going before Chaim Bloom, this was the bottom-ranked farm system just a year and a half after the Red Sox won that World Series in 2018. Now these guys are here, they're ready to go, and they want to do what all those homegrown guys did before them and hopefully bring a championship to Boston. That all starts this year when they start making their impact at Fenway Park.
You mentioned confidence a lot, which I love because I'm catching up on a lot of the press conferences and you're seeing how the nation is gravitating towards these top 3 guys. But I kind of want to dial in on Roman Anthony a little bit because from his press conferences and post-game stuff, I'm hearing a lot of leadership quotes. He seems like a born leader and somebody who can continue to develop to be a louder voice when it comes to the Red Sox organization when the tap-up comes. So what have you seen about him?
The word and the phrase that keeps coming up with a lot of those guys, but specifically Roman, is mature beyond their years. This is somebody who came in and had, some pretty big expectations that have grown since he came into to Boston. Talk about kind of these compensation draft picks, and Roman Anthony is really the headliner of how great those have been for the Red Sox the last few years. Coming out of high school, came in, kind of did what Kristian Campbell did before Kristian Campbell, rose 3 levels of the minor leagues. But Kasey, kind of like you said, that's really the big thing that stood out is the maturity and the clubhouse impact. And, him and Marcelo Mayer just, work together so well. And guys like Tristan Casas have really respected what Roman's done, long before he really got to the higher levels of the minor leagues. This was someone they looked at in AA and AAA, and guys at the major league level and now on the coaching staff talked about that at Fenway Fest as well. Just seeing the maturity and how well they're meshing into the locker room. Roman Anthony is one of the leaders of that. So when you look at somebody who, before Roki Sasaki came to the Dodgers, was looked at as the top prospect in baseball, was on that for several lists for a reason. It goes beyond the power and all the great tools he has on the field. That maturity in the clubhouse is really going to shine through this year as well.
Yeah, and that's big, that if the big thing about him is maturity, when he's the youngest of the big three, he's only 20 years old as of right now. Kristian Campbell, Marcelo Mayer, of course, being 22 years old each. The one that a lot of people have their eyes on, though, is Kristian Campbell. That seems like the guy that defensively could have the most immediate impact. His bat as well, good line drive hitter, righty, a guy that could flourish at Fenway. I know in this series you spoke to his coaches going back to his Georgia Tech days. What did those coaches share with you about Kristian that really stuck with you and made that impact of, okay, that's why this guy, beyond being the number 2 prospect in the Sox system, beyond being a top 10 prospect overall in Major League Baseball, that this guy's real deal?
I think they were just jealous they didn't get enough time with him. That was really the big takeaway that I had from talking to Coach Daniel Hall and their staff down at Georgia Tech was, cool story, right? Kristian's a kid from the Atlanta area, was able to stay there for college, and it really made an impact the year he got drafted in 2023. A fantastic season, hit like 376 down at Georgia Tech. The big thing that really stood out and how proud they are of his development since he got to the Red Sox system was how great of a hitter he was. He doesn't strike out. His bat-to-ball skills are great. They just wanted to see him put the ball in the air a little bit more, and the Red Sox wanted to see that too. Last year's really where we started to see that. Hits 20 home runs across 3 different minor league levels. All those guys down at Georgia Tech knew it could happen. They just didn't get enough time to see it there. They saw a great player. Now you're looking at really an elite prospect that's jumped from out of nowhere last year to maybe having a spot to start on opening day. That's an argument that I wrote last September. There's still a big position battle to see how that goes and where Kristian Campbell, fits into this with Rafael Devers and Alex Bregman. And that's a conversation I'm sure we'll get to. But so much of this year for the Red Sox can be decided on what Kristian Campbell does this spring.
And between those convos you had down with the guys in Atlanta and also the conversations you've had with Brian Abraham, who is the senior director of player development for the Sox, there has to be that question, where do you see Kristian playing at the major league level? What have you picked up that a lot of people are saying that Kristian Campbell will be blank when he's at the major league level?
The natural fit that keeps going around is second base, and I fully agree with that. And that's where this really comes into the argument this year of where do you play Kristian? Because, yes, he can play the outfield. His Georgia Tech coach talked about during batting practice, they just kind of let him run around in center field because that's how good of an athlete he was. And, just go out there and have some fun. And he can do that. He can certainly do that. He's gotten minor league reps in the minors as well in the outfield. But second base is really where he belongs, it feels like. And mind you, I know Alex Cora thinks that Alex Bregman can win a Gold Glove in second. He probably can. It's a great glove. But where Kristian Campbell can really make a difference for the Red Sox is second, not just for this year, but moving forward. Something I feel like I've written about a lot on NESN.com in the last few years is they've been trying to fill this hole dating back to the last time they won a championship. Like they kind of covered that hole in 2018, which is crazy to think about when you win 108 games. But they haven't had steadiness at second base since Dustin Pedroia stopped playing after the Manny Machado slide that caused that injury. They've still been trying to figure that out. They've had 2 great playoff runs since, but we're going at 7 or 8 years of having a rotating, revolving door at second base. Kristian Campbell can fill that right now, do it at a high level in 25, and be that guy for the future for you. Everyone around can see that, whether it's within the organization, the guys that have him before at Georgia Tech. Kristian Campbell belongs at second base, and he should be on the opening day roster.
Well, you kind of already led to it. He should be on the opening day roster, but when do you actually see the timeline of him getting on that roster fully? Because fans want to know, when can we see this guy? Some people were kind of speculating maybe more so he can help out in the second half of the season, seeing as there was a slump last year. So where do you most beneficially see him entering the chat of the Red Sox season?
If we're having a conversation on May 1st that Kristian is still in Worcester, I would be shocked. I really would be. I think that the talent's going to play enough that he's going to force the issue. That, I think, is how we're going to look back on this spring for Kristian Campbell and the Red Sox. He'll have forced their hand that there's no other choice than for him to be on the opening day roster. Because I know Tristan Casas kind of talked about it a few days ago and gave his thoughts on where he wants people to be and that he thinks the roster is full of adults right now. And that's the best thing that's going to help the Red Sox this year is having that veteran experience. But Kristian Campbell, you can't deny that talent anymore, right? Like, I know it was a brief stop in AAA last year, but that's all he really needed. This is a guy that's going to hit at the major league level as soon as he comes up. And for the Red Sox to really have their best fit, especially in the infield, Kristian Campbell makes sense and should be a part of that from day one when they take the field in Texas on March 27th.
Yeah, and the first article of your 8-part series will be Kristian Campbell, dropping on Monday, March 3rd as well. What about the first guy in all this is Marcelo Mayer, and he went from the top prospect, now just number 3, but he has an ETA of 2025 as well. Who did you talk to around the Marcelo Mayer circle or coaches that have helped develop him to get to this level, and what have they said about him?
I thought it was really important to talk to Brian Abraham about him because and we'll talk about this in the early months of the season too, Marcelo was really the start of this entire movement in rebuilding the farm system and getting these generational prospects back the way Jeff Passan described them. And that all started with Marcelo. So what I kind of started to ask the people around him was, for a few years, for such a dazzling prospect that had been so inconsistent, like, what has stayed consistent about him? And they keep talking about the leadership abilities. The talent's still there. When he was on the field last year, it was great for the Red Sox to see some power pop into that bat as well throughout the course of his development. Just that's been the whole story, right? Is can he stay on the field? Had another season cut short last year before he got called up to AAA, but never ended up playing in Worcester. So that's the biggest thing that they just want to see. But Red Sox people know that the leadership in Marcelo Mayer, the maturity is still there. He was the one that kind of gave that interview last year talking about how he visualizes being on the duck boats, and they talk about that a lot within him and Roman and some of the big prospects around them. That consistency and the maturity and the leadership is still there. He may not have to be the leader right when he steps in that clubhouse eventually when that call-up does come, which, if I had to guess, is probably after the All-Star break. Like, he needs sufficient time at AAA. But people like Brian Abraham and people around the Red Sox still believe in that maturity and, believe he can still be at shortstop at some point, whether that's when he comes up. Like, that's a very interesting conversation to have at some point, too, is where he fits into this infield shuffle. That's probably the good thing, is that he does need a few more months in Worcester, so the Red Sox can wait to have that conversation while they first figure out where Kristian Campbell's going. But these are all good problems to have, and Marcelo's going to force another good conversation in a few months.
Sticking with Marcelo for a minute, because I feel like we're hearing some good things out of spring training in terms of adding to that theme of consistency. Have you heard and seen some things, especially a nice game on Thursday versus the Tigers, which some people were saying, is this going to add to his favorability of jumping on the timeline to the roster a little quicker?
Yeah, everything that the Red Sox should want to see from Marcelo, he's showing. As you mentioned, Kasey went deep on Thursday. The bat's continuing what we saw last year in Portland and was hopefully going to see in Worcester. So I don't think it's going to be enough to push the envelope for opening day, just because I think they want to see him get in a rhythm and stay healthy in Worcester and adjust to that pitching before he gets to the major leagues, especially kind of like we just talked about. Like, you want to see how this infield shuffles out first, and Kristian Campbell's going to cause enough positive havoc in that conversation to see how this goes. But Marcelo Mayer, don't get it twisted, Marcelo Mayer is going to make an impact for the Red Sox in Boston in 2025, just maybe might be a few months down the line.
Yeah, and you can't have a big three if, one or two are down in the minors and one's up in the bigs. When will this big three be playing for the Red Sox full-time in your eyes, from what you've watched, what you've read, and obviously the people you've spoken to as well?
I think the first time you'll really see all three of them together will probably be sometime after the trade deadline. I think that makes the most sense. But I like that you bring up that point that you can't. It makes sense to have them all together, and that's what everybody wants. There's a reason that when Kyle Teal was still here, all three of them got the call to Worcester together. Togetherness and continuity has been the theme of this rebuild in the farm system for the Red Sox. These guys do everything together. And you read more about that in the story that Jeff Passan put out the other day, that they spent so much time in the batting cages together down at spring training, kind of talking smack at each other and making each other better. So that's still going to be a very big theme of these players in Campbell and Anthony and Mayer. Yes, they're probably going to come up incrementally. Like the way we talk about it, it's probably going to be in that order of Campbell, then Roman, late April, early May, if I had to guess, and then Marcelo after the All-Star break. But by the end of the season, you will see them all together. And for the Red Sox, that's hopefully down in a pennant race that could snap a 3-year playoff drought. Yeah,
no need to rush to get all three together, but at some point, you expect all three to be at that big level. You spoke about Campbell, second base. What about for Roman Anthony? Because that's a guy that can slot left field, right field. And Kristian Campbell, of course, has a versatility to drop back and play center, which is also a good question to have for the Red Sox when your outfield right now is Jarren Duran, Ceddanne Rafaela, Wilyer Abreu, all Gold Glove level or Gold Glove outfielders as well.
That, I think, has been the most fascinating part of putting these stories together for me is I've asked everyone around, where do you see Roman Anthony playing the most? Or when he's ready, where does he factor into this? Because it really is interesting. Like, the Red Sox want Rafaela back in center. He is an elite center fielder. That's an elite glove that we didn't get to see as much of last year because he had to move around and rely on versatility when Trevor Story went down. Jarren Duran took steps forward in center field, but will probably play left. Wilyer Abreu won a Gold Glove, like you mentioned. He's been battling that little bit of an illness so far in spring training. We wrote about that the other day of, man, kind of having all these prospects ready and all these extra arms for the Red Sox that is going to force questions and issues eventually. It's probably the best thing that could happen to them right now because if Wilyer Abreu is behind and he's just trying to get his body right, like Alex Kors talked about, maybe that does force Roman Anthony into an earlier conversation of the opening day roster where he can go to one of those spots. In terms of the people we talked to, they believe he can play all three positions. He's played mostly center field in the minors. I think there's the expectation that he's going to go to a corner spot. I feel like it's probably left, but I think because Jarren Duran has a better fit there, you could see Roman Anthony in right at some point based on the positional awareness and what they're going to need for this team. But I think really that's what's going to be the leading thing with Roman Anthony is Wilyer Abreu ready by opening day? Like it seems like he's doing better. His tests are coming back better, but that could really be the X factor. And when Roman Anthony does come up is how healthy Wilyer Abreu is the next few weeks.
Yeah, and that's the big part of it, too, because Roman Anthony, look at the bulk of his innings coming in center field. And you have to imagine what can happen, too, is what the Red Sox want is health. Trevor Story to be there as a leader, Alex Bregman to be on the diamond. If it's Kristian Campbell, whoever at second. If you give the continuity to a guy like a Ceddanne Rafaela, you have one of the best gloves and one of the best athletes out there out in center field. You give him that continuity of every day he gets to the ballpark and he's a center fielder, not a shortstop, not a second baseman, not sitting and getting a rest day. Every day he's a center fielder. It makes it easier on him mentally, and that should translate to success in the box. Did Brian Abraham give you any inkling, too, of just the Red Sox overall outlook on these three prospects and also the outlook they have on this current lineup as well?
I think, yeah, he certainly has been, talked about patience. And, I think that'll continue to be the thing for them is if Kristian forces the battle, then there's a conversation to be had on that. If Roman forces that eventually, well, I think it's probably a few weeks after Kristian, that'll be there. But they're going to impact this team. And I think really the line that I've heard that really stood out to me and how they're going to be used this year came from Alex Cora a few weeks ago, where he said, these guys should not be expected to come in here and be MVP, vote getters and MVP guys in the conversation immediately. They're supposed to be contributors, not the stars of the show. Like, that's where you rely on guys like Rafael Devers, guys like Alex Bregman, who are going to come in here and make an impact. That needs to be the expectation for them this year. This should not be, if Roman Anthony's not a top 10 MVP finisher or Kristian Campbell doesn't win Rookie of the Year, that things have gone wrong for this team. That should be how this team is viewed. This is not going to be Roman Anthony comes in and is hitting leadoff or Kristian Campbell's hitting third. These are guys that are going to be, the back half of the lineup are going to be contributors for sure, but they're going to grow into those roles. And the Red Sox still need to rely on guys like Devers and Bregman and Jarren Duran to really be that spark plug at the top, like we all know he can.
Yeah, great luxury the Red Sox have. Three great prospects look like they can play in the major league level in 2025, but also guys in those exact positions that can hold it down at the major league level as well. He's Tim Crowley of NESN.com. Catches 8-part series. First article dropping Monday, March 3rd about Kristian Campbell and his development. Tim, appreciate you taking the time. And, man, thanks for all the hard work, too, talking to all these different people around baseball. I know you love it, but we love to see it all come together, man.
George Kasey, thanks so much.
He's Tim Crowley of NESN.com. Now, if you want more Red Sox spring training, well, it's here, and everyone's watching closely to see if this team is playoff bound for 2025. We know you have a lot of questions about the Sox future, and we ask the players, coaches, execs, and alum those same questions on NESN's baseball podcast, 310 to Left. You can find on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else you get your podcasts. That's 310 to Left. New episodes dropping every week, wherever you like to listen to your podcasts. All right, Case, let's get into what's trending. You guys know it. 3 topics, 3 minutes each. And let's start with a guy we spoke about a few days ago.
Am I picking this up from you?
And if he should be I guess this is like a quirky mannerism I have.
I just did it too.
Always got to, moisturize the hands. That's what's big.
Lead.
It's
we
wintry. That is my nervous twitch of like if I get anxious, you'll see I always have Eucerin on my desk. If I get an email, I'm like, do it, moisturize.
Stress reliever.
Let me catch myself for 5 seconds, breathe. Okay, let me answer this email.
We'll get you some eucalyptus for behind the ear.
Oh, I like that. I'll pick that up. Someone that's going to need a lot of moisturizer, Travis Kelce, because he's getting old and crusty. Not really, but he plans to play in 2025. Out of all the ways that the news was broke, he texted Pat McAfee while Pat McAfee was live on his show. And the text to Pat McAfee was, "My dog, I'm coming back for sure. Going to try and get the best shape I've been this offseason, get to the mountaintop. Got a real bad taste in my mouth when I played in that last game." I mean, he played like crap. Chiefs lost to the Eagles in the Super Bowl. Chiefs got absolutely blown out. Wasn't a game by half.
Spanking.
He's coming back. Now, this is the guy we spoke about, at that age, not looking like the same. Does he take a pay cut? This is big for the Chiefs because come playoff time, come big game time, you need someone with the chemistry he has with Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
I'm not shocked he's coming back because I kept saying, there's no way he goes out like that. 3 drops in the Super Bowl, just not playing well, and that team not even close. Mm-hmm. And especially with Patrick Mahomes still in the prime of his career.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we agreed on the fact that he just looked unsatisfied,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't just the result of what was going on in the Super Bowl because, anybody on the Chiefs roster should have been unsatisfied. But I feel like the season as a whole kind of mounted on his shoulders, realistically. You're talking about, if we look at the scope of the last 5 seasons, his production rate has kind of done this wavering thing. And at the top of that, if we're looking at the past 5 seasons, there was a lot of injuries in play there. Whereas you're looking at a more healthy Travis Kelce in this past year, but yet we didn't see anything, big out of him, big out of his plays. So his receptions kind of cut down. We thought that was going to be a target share thing because of all the talent offensively that they had, but they got so injury ridden by week 2, week 3, that we assumed the production was going to kick back in hot for Travis Kelce, and it just never got there. So you're right. Patrick Mahomes is going to want his bro on the field, his most bromantic person to read him to make things happen. But it's going to be how they build this team around that scope, and if he's going to be capable of coming back and being equally as dominant, if not better, because he has to come back better.
Yeah, that has to be better. And then it's also the fact that he has a $19 million cap hit for this team. Oof. They only have around $6 million in cap space, even with the cap space growing now. Mahomes, you look at these cap hits, $66 million. Because they kept kicking the can down the road. They'll probably do the same. Just keep deferring all his payments, put into signing bonuses. Travis Kelce, $19 million. Chris Jones, $34 million. This is the worst one of them all. Jawan Taylor, $27 million cap hit.
Explain that one to me, please.
The cap hits?
No, just the
Jawan Taylor?
he played
well. He played well. Won a Super Bowl. Got an extension and just stinks.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the one. Right. Well, no, because cap hits can get confusing because even you see $66 million from Mahomes. And the Jawan Taylor one's real because even if they cut him, they wait a season. He'll be off the books by next season because they'll save $20 million in cap space. They just need to navigate this offseason. And that has to be a real conversation between Brett Veach and Travis Kelce.
Right.
You're coming back. You're 36. We love it. You've done so much. We got to reconstruct it, and you got to do something that's team-friendly. We've paid you. We've gotten you the rings. Get us one more ring, and you're going to make more money off the field.
100%. This has got to be a selfless situation. And look, how much more does he need? He's got the podcast, the endorsements,
he could marry Taylor Swift.
You could marry Taylor Swift.
Probably a billionaire.
Yeah, you're set for life.
Yeah.
Yeah, move on.
Yeah.
Well, not yet, but after the
I get what you're saying. Move on from the big bucks. Talk about someone being selfish in a good way. Myles Garrett not open to a contract extension with the Browns. Myles Garrett, this is the report, is unwilling to negotiate a contract extension with the organization as his agents have apparently slammed the door shut on any discussions. Garrett reaffirms he no longer wants to be in Cleveland. Around Super Bowl time, he was in an interview, said that, I want to be in games that I want to be with the team that has an actual chance of playing in the Super Bowl, playing in the playoffs. That certainly is not happening with Cleveland and the situation they're in with Deshaun Watson. Just good for him.
Right.
Brown's leadership can say whatever they want. We're not trading him. He's going, I'm not signing an extension. Get me out of here.
Yeah, 100%. Like, we knew that this was coming. And honestly, whether you love the personality or not, like, he does deserve better. He cannot be the main workhorse to help this team have any sort of flattering play.
Yeah.
And they knew that rope was going to be extremely short. So there's a lot of other places where he has an ability to potentially chase that ring better, or actually finally get the ring. And I mean, there's about 5 landing spots. Selfishly, I think he should go to Tampa Bay. But there's about 5 great landing spots for him. And at the end of the day, once you start having these conversations, the relationship changes, you know? So when the relationship changes between you and the organization, it's just an unfavorable situation. Make it a clean breakup. Get out. Move on.
It's just funny. Like, Cleveland drafted Myles Garrett. So they've drafted their starting defensive end, tight end, both their starting cornerbacks. At one point, drafted their starting quarterback in winning playoff games in Baker. Now you guys have him. Of course, you're happy. They're starting running back, 2 starting linebackers, they're starting safety. They've drafted all those positions. And they drafted well in the offensive line. Some injuries have gone the worst of them. They've done everything right in the draft, including Myles Garrett, the best defensive player in the NFL. And then they gave Deshaun Watson a lot of money.
Too much money.
100% guaranteed money, to the point where ownership's forcing him to play if he's healthy. And that just completely blew up all the work they did. The hardest stuff is like scouting guys, drafting well, keeping those guys in your building, developing them to become starters like they've done. That's the hard part. The easy part is paying what someone else has scouted and developed.
Yep.
They messed up the easy part. They got the hard part right. But yeah, I was like, do the Eagles give up 2 firsts for Myles Garrett? Makes sense. It'd be a 32nd overall pick. Detroit at 28th, maybe 2 firsts from Green Bay. They're picking 23rd in this draft. I know Tampa's like in that 20-ish range as well.
Mixed.
Brown should move on. Get 2 firsts for him, just move on.
Yeah, and plus, like you said, they've done the right things in terms of who they've drafted, but to not make it click, I mean, that just speaks to a higher issue. So at that point, they need to find a clean slate, go back to the drawing board, and rebuild that organization and let Myles Garrett move on.
A team that's picking 2nd overall, by the way, too.
Right.
Like, you have the 2nd overall pick, you'll get a key guy. You have 2 firsts, you could take the extra first next year to move up into the first. With there's so many things they can do, again, to rebuild the team. I'm just happy for Myles Garrett just being like, I'm closing the door on this one. I'm done. It's like, lose my number.
Yeah, not the clinger. He's getting rid of the stage 5 clinger.
Exactly. He is steadfast in his decision. More about NFL draft. Abdul Carter. Doctors are saying the surgery is not advisable after further scans on his right foot. He's dealing with a stress reaction, not a stress fracture. And me to put my doctor hat on quick. A stress reaction can become a stress fracture, which would need surgery, but he doesn't need surgery for a stress reaction. He can just rest it for 8 weeks. That's a good sign for the guy. Phenomenal athlete, plays really well. It's an 8-week recovery window, which if that starts for now, he will be fully recovered if he follows the 8-week procedure by the time the NFL draft rolls around. So before a team gets him on their roster, he'll already be recovered well for that stress reaction. Got to make sure I say reaction.
I know, the clarifications.
I don't want, I talk fast sometimes. It's good news.
No, I know the pain of a stress fracture. It is good news. My only concern, and of course you can't go against doctors, right?
Yeah.
But like having the irritation of the injury, not needing surgery, I mean, this is such a high contact game. I mean, one bit of discomfort can throw this into a maybe we should have done this months ago kind of thing. And I know this because, like, I mentioned that my brother played at FSU. There was a number of guys coming out of that season that were like, do we surgery? Do we not surgery? Then they end up putting themselves in bad positions for the first 2 months of their brand new careers in the NFL because that one tackle, that one hit irritated it to a magnitude that it's just like, we could have cleared this up. So that's my only concern.
But again, if he rests it right,
I
think that's a big thing. And even if he gets surgery done, it's like a normal procedure as well.
Right.
You just want to rest it right so it doesn't accelerate to then, the 8 weeks, you don't do the right healing. He starts mini camp workouts with the team, re-aggravates it. Then it's 8 weeks from then and doesn't get that true rookie offseason. Abdul Carter also tweeted, "You can't stop greatness. Y'all thought I was going that easy. This is just going to make the movie more interesting. See y'all March 28th. Bring your popcorn." March 28th is Penn State Pro Day. Number 1 overall pick, 56 days. Inshallah, which means God willing, or it's already written, which means that's Arabic for, God willing, I'll be all right. God willing, I'll be the number 1 or number 2 overall pick. He's hoping number 1. 56 days. That's not 4 weeks, folks.
No.
That's that's not 8 weeks. And that's where I get concerned. It's like, dude, you need the pro day? Doesn't. He doesn't need to work out the combine. But it's between him and Travis Hunter, and they both want to take pride in being the number 1 overall pick. And you know what? Titans should feel so flattered.
So flattered.
Because who else wants to go play for the Titans that bad? No one else.
They're lucky that nowadays kids just really want to be that number 1 pick. I mean, the confidence of these dudes, the statements that are coming out of the combine are just, they're not wild. You love to see it, but also you're just like, all right, kid, do you know what you're signing up for yet?
Or they want to be the number 1 overall pick because they don't want to be number 2 because number 2 is the Browns.
Everybody's avoiding the Browns.
I don't blame them.
Look at you just solving another puzzle piece all over again.
I don't blame
on
them.
the fly.
First off, it's Cleveland. Second off, it's the Browns. No offense to the beautiful people of Cleveland.
Right. Nothing against you, Cleveland.
The city.
Yeah.
It's the city, not the people.
The organization.
Yeah, and the Haslips. No, for sure.
Needs
That's
to
what
glow
it really
up.
is.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, stream the entire Sox season with Nesson 360 and a new annual plan available at an all-new reduced price of just $20 a month paid annually. And for a limited time, get 4 free tickets to Fenway with your purchase. Visit Nesson360.com to sign up today. Talking about the other possible number 1 overall pick, that's Travis Hunter. And he held court at the combine, says he wants to play 100% of the snaps, both sides of the ball in the NFL.
Yep.
Dude, love it. Love the confidence. I don't think you should. Don't think you have to, but love it. You can play both sides. Doesn't have to be 100%. Mm-hmm. Said he believes it's harder to play wide receiver and cornerback than for Shohei Ohtani to hit and pitch. I don't know about that. Really hard to hit a baseball.
The confidence.
But then also, here's a key one. Super important for him to be number 1 overall pick. My dream is to go number 1 and be the best I can be. Whether he goes number 1 or not won't affect him being the best. But yeah, it's just and you need at that position. Cornerback, wide receiver, that's all confidence in that one.
Right, especially when you want to enter the NFL, continuing to play both sides of the ball, number 1. Number 2, to say that you could do it full out and 100%.
Yep.
And while he mentioned that, NFL, he gets a little bit more rest, I don't know if he's really bringing into consideration that, like, the hits are harder.
Yeah.
Like the all outs are different than college. The pace is different. So you got to have a trusted coach who can manage a guy playing both sides of the ball, manage what that snap count has to look like to make sure they're protecting their player. Because even if he's capable of doing it, you don't put him in the category of generational talent for no reason, right? But even with the capability, you don't want to put your top player at risk. Because then you're putting him at an opportunity to potentially get hurt more often than not. And that's going to take him out of the game. And that's going to change the whole number 1 draft pick and what he means to a team very fast. Yeah.
I think the simplest and the best thing for him, his athleticism, his hands, his catch radius, like his body control on the boundaries is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. And you see it in the interceptions he pulls down, but also just him as a receiver, how good of a route runner he is. He just reminds me a lot of like a longer limbed Garrett Wilson, like bigger catch radius, longer arms, but like just surgical with his route running. Go on, be 100% at wide receiver. And then, but like with that, I want him 100% at corner. I want him situationally at receiver. Mm-hmm. And there is like, do you want him throwing his shoulder into NFL players or do you want him getting hit by NFL players? That's what's tough. But I just think of the way to pick up an NFL defense, the way to pick up an NFL playbook. It's easier to, hey, here are the packages, here are the routes you're going to run. This is what you're going to do on third down. This will be you in the red zone. Yes. This will be you on the goal line. This is what you're going to do. Instead of dropping someone in on defense situationally, because communication's much more key on defense. Like everyone at every level has to be on the same page. And if he just gets one thing off and it's harder to pick up if you're going mid-drive or mid-game on defense compared to offense where it's in the huddle, you have the play, you're on the sidelines, you hear from the coach. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. 100% at cornerback, where he could be all pro. And then go into the spots at wide receiver. The 100% both sides of the ball, that's fine. But if he wants to into the longevity of his career,
right?
Just one side of the ball. No one's saying playing one side. We're just saying, dude, best for you in longevity. Don't go 100% on both.
Right. Yeah. You got to pick your moments. And that's what I mean by the best coach will help
50,
with that.
That'd be 100 snaps a game in the NFL, possibly.
Yeah. Again, generational talent, but I don't think you realize what that actually means until you get to this level and have to, run through that sort of exercise. But I know everyone's talking about him being the number 1 pick. It's just like the Titans are basically in a full-blown rebuild at the moment, and they've got a number of things ahead of wide receiver or cornerback that are just kind of dire to starting that rebuild. Yeah. Then let's skip the Browns. We've already mentioned the fact nobody's really key on going there.
I
know Travis is looking for Hunter to join the Massachusetts area, but to make a case for it, Mike Vrabel played both sides of the ball. So you have a coach who actually could probably manage, exactly, who could properly manage this kind of player to where he's not exhausting himself. He's not putting himself too much at risk to, end up not being a part of the team or the roster. And yeah, he can thrive on both sides. So I think that if he really wants to do that and commit to it, then he needs to go to the right organization that's going to help him completely bloom in that space.
Yeah, and Elliot Wolf was asked about Travis Hunter when he spoke at the Combine. Check it out right here.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Hunter's a tremendous prospect. As a number of these guys are. He's obviously been very unique, won the Heisman Trophy, playing both ways. He's really unique and instinctive at both positions. So I think there's a scenario where, he's probably going to major in one and minor in the other, but I think there's a scenario where he could play both ways.
That's a good way to put it too. Major in one, minor in the other. Everyone has their major in college and then they pick up another degree.
I love that. That puts it so poetically, and it's so true because it kind of paints out what the workload should look like. So where does he really want to keep his major focus? Yeah. Offense or defense?
And that's Elliot Wolf, glowing reviews of Travis Hunter too, and that's what people want to see. The dream scenario for Patriots fans would be Abdul Carter probably goes one to the Titans. The Browns need a quarterback. They go Cam Ward. Giants need a quarterback. They go Shedeur Sanders, or someone trades up, swaps with the Giants and takes Shedeur. And it's Travis Hunter sitting there at 4. What Patriots fans want, no matter what, are 2 quarterbacks going in the top 3 picks, because that means Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter are there at 4. You can't predict one of those 2, but you want those 2 quarterbacks going.
100%. Yeah. I mean, again, when you remove the whole I just want to be number 1 situation from it, and you're looking at the best fit and longevity and long term for your career and to really establish yourself in the NFL, I think it makes sense for Travis Hunter to move down the board just a little bit. It's not going to change anything. He's still going to come in and shake things up in the NFL. But I think that you're right. I think those 2 top quarterbacks coming off is going to be the most the most important thing that Patriots fans are going to be looking for. Yeah, that, and it's again with free agency, they can address offensive line of free agency. And at cornerback, what's important too is a lot of the cost control type contracts, where Kristian Gonzalez has 3 years left on his rookie deal pretty much. But then with Travis Hunter, you get that elite, all-pro caliber corner. Right. That's a pillar position, something you need filled in. And where he's a one-of-one prospect, it's really, in a weak draft, it still has 2 outstanding prospects in Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. So you go with one of those 2 guys. You're in a great spot for a weak draft. You're lucky your team needs aren't dire at the quarterback position, where you'd be settling at quarterback, or you could be settling at wide receiver, or settling at offensive tackle, where if they get a Travis Hunter that falls to them, it just makes all the sense in the world. And maybe they see it different than both of us, or more importantly, Maybe they see him full-time receiver, play certain packages at corner. That's fine. You're still going to get a really good pass catcher and a really good receiver that's fantastic in the red zone. And that would be him and Drake May, with that chemistry building for the next 4 years, minimum. And that's what would be massive as well. I feel like they'd have a strong chemistry out the gate there. But kind of circling back to you mentioning the favorability of kind of picking up an offensive line in free agency, I think that needs to be the move for the Patriots. You need a veteran presence on that offensive line, especially with all of the moving pieces by coaches coming in, and then hearing that there might be a more dominant gap scheme being run by McDaniels, and then you got Drake May still developing. You need leadership on that offensive line. So there was a couple guys on the younger side. They weren't very healthy throughout the year, but you grab another guy in the draft and you're keeping the age very premature when it comes to the offensive line. It's going to take more time, and I know they're not rushing anything, but I think it's just going to help give this team that jump that much more, and it's going to keep a guy like Travis Hunter that much more interested and kind of hopeful as to where this team can go sooner rather than later. Hey, you have the franchise quarterback, you get another face of the franchise and a Hunter and Abdul Carter. That's what's important for this team. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. Want to hear more about all Boston sports? Check out NESN's Daily Sports Podcast. Boston has entered the chat. You can enter the conversation by tweeting at us using the hashtag NESNChat, or email the chat at NESN.com. Boston has entered the chat. Is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and wherever else you get your podcasts. All right, talking some Bruins now. You're right, I do it. Yeah. And for those not watching, I rub my hands and I was doing, all right, talking some Bruins. And as soon as you open up, and I just hear it, and I slowly start doing it myself. But you know what? It's not bad. We're cooking content. Exactly. That's it. We're scheming here. Every topic's got a new cook to it. It's like Birdman rubbing his hands, scheming up some bars to drop. So according to Bruins interim head coach Joe Sacco, Trent Frederic is considered, quote, week to week after leaving Tuesday's Bruins game with a lower body injury.
But the sense is that it won't change any plans ahead of the trade deadline. It doesn't trade plans. The tough part for the Bruins, it affects the trade value.
Yeah. And it's going to change the shape of what they can get. And we just circle back to the cautious approach. Brick broke it down so perfectly, I would say, on the Hockey Hub. But if you have a cautious approach, the next thing that's going to impact everything is what value you can get for whom. Yeah. And, what moves are you going to make now that you can hold on to over the course of the next couple of seasons? Or a move you're just going to make for now and then get it off the table this summer. So it's going to be tough because there is value, I think, to Trent Frederic tremendously. I know we've typically seen him as a bottom six guy, but system changes everything. And we've seen a lot of possibility, maybe more so last season than this season, but a lot has changed this season, which is going to change the style of play for a number of players. But that's going to be tough for this Bruins organization.
And this is a guy who's bottom six, playing left wing, and he could play center as well for a team. There's a lot of teams that would want him, though. 26 years old. The versatility in his position to play up the middle or play out on the left wing with his right shot. Really tough. Brings a lot of hits to the ice. So you saw a lot of teams, like, he just makes sense as a fit.
Right.
Like a depth piece for those teams in the playoff picture making a push. Like the Red Wings would certainly like to look at him. They could use help on the left wing, especially on the third line. Even think of the Wild, or there could be teams like maybe the Devils that just want to get a boost. Same thing with the Rangers. The teams that make sense to buy. But then, and he would probably get, I would say, a second rounder return. The tough part is he was having a dip in his play.
Right.
40 points last season, 31 points the season before, at 15 right now, and just not producing. But it's hard given like the line he's playing on, the lack of production. It's throughout this whole team. So the trade value wasn't that high for him as he's set to become a free agent after the season. This just makes a bigger hit. So does that second round pick become a third? Our team's not spooked by it. That's the thing of like week to week is so ambiguous.
My gosh.
Because week to week could be next week he's good, 3 weeks he's good. And for teams that are holding on to a wild card spot or just on the outside, they can't afford a down week, especially for someone they're trading for and giving up draft assets for.
Yeah, they're going to drive up the negotiations, which is just going to take a lot of things off of the table.
Yeah.
But kind of circling back to what you mentioned, like a lot of the movement, him playing on that third line, you're also talking about somebody who's kind of carried the responsibility of playing with younger players still, looking for a lot more development in their game. So when you have all of these other factors that are playing into an already kind of, different season, it's going to change the nature of your game. And that's probably what I would hope the Bruins can try to, if this is the piece they're trying to move, I hope that this is the selling point that they can kind of make here, is like, you've seen what he can do. You've seen the leader that he's had to be on the third line, the inconsistency of who he's had to play with, and basically how he's had tried to elevate the guys around him. But with there being, some identity changes with this Bruins team, you can't really expect a lot out of a guy like Frederic. So I would say that to say that it shouldn't bring down his value, especially because I really think he can make an impact. I mean, the Canucks is another team that's been kind of kicked around in terms of bringing him in. I think they could use him a lot because you kind of need more physicality on your bottom six if you're the Canucks team, and you're still trying to, they've had health issues with their goalies. They have a lot of offensive defensive structure when it comes to their D zone. So Trent Frederic really fits the bill in terms of like coming in and helping right away. And they kind of have the wiggle room money wise and kind of can go back and forth negotiation when it comes to those draft picks. Yeah,
if you put him in Vancouver, he slots in next to Suter and Bozer. I don't know if I'm saying Bozer right. The right winger on their third line. Besser, thank you. But that's a high scoring line, which elevates his game because there's not a lot of production happening around him in Boston.
Right.
You get him in a higher scoring production between Besser and Suter next to him. He slots into that left wing line, a left wing of that line. Those are also experienced guys. Like you point out, he plays with young guys. If you get him to the Red Wings on the third line, like Vladimir Tarasenko is putting in a lot of minutes for them as a depth piece.
Yep.
So all of a sudden you have a younger center, but it's Tarasenko on his right side. And then you have a Trent Frederic who has a lot of hockey experience on his left side. Like that's where I look at these teams that are in the playoff pictures and just need more depth scoring. And but the part with him too, and why I liked him as a Bruin, he's more than depth scoring. It's the toughness. It's the hits. He's a guy that will drop gloves. He will give his team juice. He will also have his teammates' backs. There's a lot of value around him. And that's I think that's the best point. And that's why I go, like, what's the week to week?
Right.
Because if it's 1 week, I don't think the value takes a hit because he does a lot more than score. He does a lot more than add toughness. He's just a very well-rounded game. He's a good skater and at a very young age, too.
Yes, and that's what I love. I love how old he is, and circling back to the physicality, because when we're looking at the compete required once you get into the playoffs and let alone the Stanley Cup Finals, you're looking for teams that can be more physical. I mean, that's why the Panthers were the force that they were. They were so physical. They were exhausting to play against. They wore down their opponent, and Frederic's one of those guys that can really jump in on the forechecking action. Kind of makes smart back-checking plays, but, certain games we haven't seen it as much. But, again, the right system can just elevate all that out of him. And I love that you point out the lines when it comes to the Canucks as well as the Red Wings. I think it would behoove him to be with guys that can elevate his play rather than him being relied on to elevate the rest of the line.
Yeah.
That just might not be a strong suit at this point in his career.
Yeah, and it's at this point, if you sell, and for a team too, if they put him into a line, maybe they don't want to re-sign him. They just want to bring him in, trade him, and then maybe agree to him on an extension. But like, you want to get the best out of him, it increases his value long term as well.
Right.
For a team too, if they put him in a spot where he can flourish. And I think I keep going back to Detroit because it's been so long since they've been good.
Yeah.
And it's finally all coming together for them. Like Larkin and Raymond and Mo Sider. But you added Trent Frederic. Like they drafted well. They drafted well with those guys. And then you add where you need to. You fill in the holes where you need to. And someone like a Trent Frederic can elevate that team a ton. I wonder too, though, it's this injury as well. It gives the opportunity. The two names that come into on like the Bruins prospects is John Farinacci, Georgi Murkolov, both 24 years old, good scorers. Farinacci's his second year with the Providence Bees. But these are the guys that, okay, Frederick's out. Do they get more run? Do they get more time on the ice? And they have to, because the flip side for the Bruins, like, what do you do with Trent Frederic? Okay, he's going to be out no matter what.
Right.
This is the NHL experience you need for these prospects, because these prospects need to start becoming professionals if the Bruins want to get back on track to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, and at some point you really have to give a hand to the development. You really got to test out where these guys are so that you can see the nature of what their play is going to be now or how it's going to grow. And I think for a team that there's some wiggle room because the cap space does have that 5% increase coming up. So there's ways to finesse some things. But if you can save yourself some money in terms of giving development that time and that effort and that energy, then you're going to get a better big picture. I think it all just comes back down to the fact of like finding that identity. And I'd hate to compare it to the Rangers, but it's kind of the same thing. You've got some guys in development at the farm team and you're just kind of waiting to see when's their moment going to be. You pull them up for a second and then you leave them back down there to develop. And you don't realize like what the identity of this team is going to be in the course of the next year. And it's going to help answer a lot of questions to see where those guys are at. But either way, they're going to have to bring in another presence. Definitely. I think they need another veteran in this locker room to help. Yeah,
they can't go into next season solely with like prospects coming up and figure they need bona fide NHL guys. They have a good amount of cap space, I think $22 million, and then you mentioned it's going to go up by 5%. Greg Wyshynski of ESPN, he put out like tiers. And where Trent Frederic fell was like the bargain contract tier of like trade deadline guys. Justin Brazeau was a bargain contract tier as well. Mason Laraille, 25 and under tier. That's a guy that they're going to keep and extend.
They have to.
Great skater, great vision. Just needs to improve his overall awareness on the ice, cut down the bad mistakes.
On Tuesday, so he's showing strides.
It's just you want that consistency.
100%.
And what's important with the Laraille is also when you have guys like Zadorov, McAvoy, Lindholm on your blue line for a long term, you need a young guy like Laraille. Continue to learn from them. He doesn't have to be rushed into a certain role. Carlo is the one I always get caught on. That one for him, he put elite players with term tier, because Brandon Carlo, 26 years old, big defenseman, skates really well. I'm not ready to just write him off after a down year. That's a guy that's played well in the playoffs for them, shows a lot of promise. That's someone I would want to hold on to as a Brandon Carlo type player.
Yeah, I think Carlo should stay in the mix. I don't think Laraille should be touched whatsoever. I mean, do you think there could be like a package deal that can go between Brazeau and Frederic? Because, I mean, if you're looking at two bargain contract tiers and you're okay to move two of them along, you might need to bring up a development guy, or you'd be surprised what you'd get. I mean, it doesn't take a lot of money to stabilize your bottom six.
Yeah.
Especially if you decide that one of those lines of your third or fourth line is going to be your physical line. And that's going to be the line that comes in and shuts down your opponents. One of their top six guys can keep up with them, wear them out. Like, the structure can be so much more simple sometimes. And again, I'm sorry to use the Panthers as an example, but there wasn't a lot of money for them to play with heading into their Stanley Cup run. And you look at the pieces that they plucked for their bottom six, and they were the top guys to try to help them out to get as far as they did in their run.
They knew how to. It was like a wave after wave crashing on you.
Yes.
The way the Panthers played. What's tough is same thing. I don't know what Brazeau fetches, and maybe you have to put them together to get a better draft pick in return,
right?
And something you could fill in. Because Frederic's, I think, 1 point his last 11 games. Brazeau's like scoreless his last 10. That's a tough part when you look at it. It's going into the deadline. You want him to be playing better hockey. This Bruins team just can't stay healthy.
Yeah.
And the Frederic, the timing of it just stinks. Like absolutely the timing of his injury. Because that was a key piece in it all.
Yeah. Do you think that do you feel like there would be a scenario in which it would be better to hold on to Frederic and try to do other movement?
Yeah, again with the cap space, I think he's a good player. But it's a matter of like, all right, what do you do to put talent around him? Because you have to fill out that third line, and that's a part of it all. It's all right. Do you need draft picks? Because are you going to kind of reset and go into like a reset year? I'm not going to say rebuild, like a reset year, because that's what draft picks are. They're prospects. But when you talk about a Carlo or a Frederic, those are guys that are like professionals I want to keep on my team and continue to build out with. Not guys that I want to deal because. You get someone else in there, you don't know what they're going to become. Those guys are like NHL players.
Yes.
Frederic's like one I want to build around, but it's tough of where the answer is elsewhere, you know?
Yeah.
And it is along the if you look on the wings, like Nikolai Ehlers is one of the top free agents that'll hit in this offseason. That's a guy that could come in, play left wing. All of a sudden, you're a lot better on the sides, especially we don't know what happens with Brad Marchand after this season. But then it's, okay, so you have 3 good wings. You don't have that overall depth. And what we get into, too, it's like, okay, you bring in Ehlers, but does that make Frederic better? Like, you still have Patra in that role. That's what makes it hard.
You know who secretly I feel like should come in and could do some damage with them in a good way? Jared McCann.
Yeah.
I feel like he's the kind of guy who has the ability to elevate the players around him. He's got some sneaky statistics sometimes. You push in Frederic to the center, you let him come in at left wing, and now you're elevating that third line. And he shouldn't be that costly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'd be Lindholm, Zacha, Frederic, your top 3 centers. Maybe Patra, slot him in on that 4th line. Just finding a way, pieces of the puzzle. She's Kasey Hudson. I'm George Balekji. This is Boston has entered the chat. Thank you so much making us a part of your day. Catch new episodes dropping every Monday through Friday, every week, wherever you get your podcast. We'll see you guys at the beginning of next week on Monday. Have a good one, everyone.